Iranian women are removing their hijab in public on a scale never seen before. They are not just taking it off, some are burning it. They are doing so as an act of defiance against their Islamic regime, knowing that the government severely punished other women who tried this before. The current nationwide protests in Iran were sparked by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. She died after being arrested for her so-called improper hijab by the Islamic morality police. Many Iranians, and especially many Iranian women, are furious. But unlike what some media outlets are saying, this is not just about the hijab. You might have heard about other anti-regime protests in Iran, but this one is different. I have followed many of the protests and listened to Iranian street activists, leaders, and experts. There seems to be an understanding among opposition groups and even pro-regime groups that what we are witnessing now is a turning point. It's not just that we have never before seen public removal of hijab at this scale. There are also, for the first time, signs of cracks in the regime's stability as a result of the protests. A slow ideological shift has been taking place in the past couple of years, one that is now demonstrating itself in the recent protests. The shift is so apparent that it has forced the government to allow the discussion of the legitimacy of the morality police and mandatory hijab on national TV. Even though most of the discussion surrounds the hijab, much more is at stake for both the regime and the protesters. Before you understand this shift and its significance, you must first know how the hijab and taking off the hijab have become rallying cries for and against a wannabe Islamic empire. The hijab is much more than an Islamic mandate for Iran's government. Given that the hijab is the most visible Islamic mandate, using women's bodies, the hijab has become the Islamic Republic's proof of the legitimacy of its authority. That is why every woman with a hijab in Iran is a walking banner legitimizing the government's authority. A woman with a hijab in every street, store, office, or restaurant is a constant reminder of the state's influence and control. To challenge the hijab is to challenge that control. The Islamic Republic is built upon one idea above all else, and that idea is that the Iranian people want an Islamic regime. The regime's legitimacy comes from the understanding that the people of Iran and the region want Islamic law, and that the Islamic Republic is delivering that to them. If it is shown that the people don't want Islamic law, then what is the point of the Islamic Republic? And that is why that as powerful as the hijab is for the regime to solidify its rule over both women and men, taking off and opposing the hijab can also be a powerful weapon, not just to reject the hijab, but to question the regime's authority altogether. This is why it is so difficult for the regime to make the hijab voluntary. If Iranian women are not forced to wear the hijab, would most of them take it off? Few things could be a more visible display that the regime's Islamic standards are not the choice of the people. And more problematic than that are the remaining supporters who could lose faith in the regime if Islamic standards are not enforced. This is why the women in Iran are leading their protests. This is why, if the Iranian regime falls, it is the Iranian women who made it crumble. So why are these protests different? Remember how I mentioned the regime's base support? See, when I grew up in Iran, we had this basic understanding that the Iranian people are either religious and pro-regime or not religious and anti-regime. As I got older, things got a little more complicated. Yet division still was often based on religious lines. Every year that passed, it seemed that the nature of this division was slightly changing. In the past couple of years, more secular Iranians have been surprised to come across examples of religious Iranians that were against the regime. Every new protest seemed to introduce more religious Iranians standing with the more secular-minded ones against the Islamic Republic. We even got introduced to many Iranians that would choose Islam for themselves but wanted a secular government. Even though this gradual change has been quite apparent, Mahsa Amini's death has ignited a more united cry of anger from the Iranian people than any that has been heard since the Islamic Revolution more than 40 years ago. Mahsa's death has created a coalition from almost every ideological sect, something that all the opposition groups were unable to do in the past 4 decades. Nothing can threaten the regime more than the regime itself, and the regime is its base. To lose that base support is to lose their hold on power. This is why they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. To continue enforcing the mandatory hijab laws can lead many regime supporters to sympathize with the protesters. To stop enforcing the mandatory hijab laws can lead many other regime supporters to oppose the regime for not enforcing Islamic laws. Either way, the key to toppling the regime is to turn it on itself, and many Iranian women have seemed to figure out how to do exactly that. Please share this video with as many people as you can so that more people know what's happening right now in Iran.